access the session. And without further ado, I will pass through to James Clack, the Head of Digital Learning at ActiveIQ.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me. It's great to have so many familiar names in the chat or in the participant section. I'm just going to share my screen with everybody so you can see what I'm going to be talking about today. 2 seconds. So you should all be able to see that now. So like Chris said, my name is James Clack. For those of you who haven't met me before, I am the Head of Digital Learning at ActiveIQ, and I'm here to talk to you today about some learnings from lockdown in relation to education, training, L&D, which is going to be so vital in this recovery from this pandemic. So we are 1 year and 1 day, I believe, in from the first official national lockdown. And we know it's hit multiple sectors and industries really, really hard and in many different ways as well. But as well as impacting industry and sectors, it's impacted many, many lives, including health, well-being, mental health, so on and so forth. Out of all of this, it's obviously created many, many challenges for all of us, and no more, I guess, than in the world of education and training. But with all of that, and the challenges that it's created, it's also created many, many opportunities, and that's something which I want to cover part of today. So it's not going to be a doom and gloom story, not for all of it anyway. We will do a little bit of reflection on what could have happened based on some metrics, data, insights, intelligence, etc., from various reports. But what I do want to do is take a broad brush today and look at education in the kind of broader sense, from pre-lockdown to lockdown, what happened there, and also what the future means for education and training post-lockdown, by looking at some trends, some things that have popped up and developed as a result of not just the COVID pandemic and lockdown, but things which were probably in play beforehand. So let's get on, I guess, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end if you want to ask. Chris will be monitoring that for me, so we can pick those up at the end if you do have anything. So first things first then, pre-lockdown. Makes sense to start there really, and look at what learning, how it took place, what kind of format, etc. We noticed, particularly as an awarding organisation, but also from my background and experience, I've been working kind of formal education really since 1999 and kind of more informally before that, in a mixture of environments. And some of what I'm going to be covering today is based on that experience and learnings which I've had, interactions I've had, etc., etc. But also some will come from various trends, topics, webinars I've attended, research, etc., etc. So to paint a bit of a picture, really, it makes sense to start here. So traditionally, what we've seen in terms of delivery of education, we saw significant dominance of what we call face-to-face or in-person delivery. And that typically would take place in a venue, what we might refer to as bricks and mortar, or some people refer to as live, but also what many of us regard as traditional learning. So that was the main format structure which we've used to now, and work-based learning obviously was a huge part of that, with apprenticeships in their old format and their current newer format as well. So with this, that was the dominant form or delivery model for education, but we've also seen a number of other models, and these include blended or what's also known as hybrid learning. And then we've also got distance learning, which, whilst we don't really advocate, it does occur, particularly with higher education programs, not so much with vocational programs, which obviously serve a lot of our sector. And then there's also what's known as flipped classrooms, which isn't that new. It's been around for a long time, but it is showing signs of traction and more inclusion or adoption. So there are other various forms of delivery methods, but these are the main ones really, which I wanted to cover. But as you can see, based on the size of those kind of markers, the size really represents their dominance previously. But what we also have seen is almost a growth area. This is pre-lockdown, remember. So we've seen a growth area, particularly in blended learning, as technology and ed tech and diverse range of learner needs and requirements grow. You know, we developers a species, as humans, we have more and more interests, more and more commitments. We can't necessarily always commit to turning up to a venue or bricks and mortar venue for in-person live training, so to speak. There could be cost attached to that, transport issues, other commitments, etc. So whilst face-to-face has not diminished, blended has become more and more of a viable option for learners and also training providers to use. And we've certainly seen that grow over the number of years, particularly since I've been with Active IQ and in my role previously with other organisations and institutions beforehand as well. So this growth in blended, like I said, has come from developments in EdTech technology and also EdTech and technologies research and development and adoption by the wider education community as well. So where people were once attending FE colleges and universities in person, we're seeing more and more content being delivered almost virtually, whether that's in real time or recorded content. But we're also seeing people or institutions move towards more and more assessment remotely as well. And there are various issues that surround that, as well as pros and benefits as well. So you may see other terms which come up and are used interchangeably a lot of the time. I just wanted to clear those up now really before we get stuck in. So as it shows you on the screen there, we have terms remote, online, e-learning, virtual, digital. There's also real-time is another one which pops up frequently. All of these things have been grouped together almost, and a lot of people that I've come into contact with over the years refer to all these as e-learning or online learning. They do have elements of online learning and they may include e-learning, but they are not those things specifically. So different approaches will have different variations of those methods of delivery. So e-learning, for instance, traditionally has been things like SCORM files, tin can files, which are used on a LMS platform and shared. Different varying ranges of interactivity for those and purpose. And they're seeing a lot in workplace L&D, not so much previously in FE, HE or school programs, but with everything that's happened in this lockdown and pandemic, it's been seen more and more. But e-learning as an actual product really grew after 9/11 because of the issues around transporting or people moving around from place to place to attend live in-person bricks and mortar training. E-learning really took off and really grew after that because of people's inability to travel really and a need to roll out training and development. So e-learning as a standalone product definitely has a place, but what I want to really focus on today is more about the remote virtual digital experience in a kind of blended or hybrid, and some people refer to this as high flex method of delivery. High flex because it offers so much opportunity to tweak, change and amend how learning is delivered and also how assessment occurs and everything else that surrounds that. So we've seen a definite shift and growth area in blended as well as work-based learning, obviously with the change in the apprenticeship format. So that's a bit about the past, but almost we can't get away from what's happened recently. Oh, I say recently, over the past 12 months. So the dreaded lockdown, and essentially we were looking at our Active IQ, we were looking at our tech stack and our e-resources, etc., that we were going to provide learners, probably about 6 months, looking at how we would develop those and meet the demands of a changing education landscape. And then lockdown happened and we also had to change some of our approach to that. And we've taken a lot from that and we'll roll those out in a new project, which we'll be sharing very soon. But with lockdown being announced, in the back of most people's minds, it was only going to be a few weeks or month or so at worst. But in the back of my mind, and I'm sure in many of you, there was this niggling feeling that it was going to go on for much longer, and indeed it did, and it's turned out to be quite a pivotal point in the world of education and how we're going to approach education, I think personally, moving forwards. So what we did with understand that lots of our training providers had maybe limited resources or limited experience of changing a delivery model, which they were used to as a bricks and mortar or in-person delivery strategy or process, to switching that to a more remote, digital, virtual, whatever we want to call it, process. We knew that we had to do something to help centres, and even if that was just in the form of raising awareness of what's out there. And many centres, took like ducks to water to the whole process and the transition. And I hear the word pivot mentioned a lot. It's not a word I'm particularly fond of. I don't actually feel we did pivot. I felt we were already on this trajectory personally. It's just that this whole COVID pandemic and lockdown has escalated the need for us to move it forward at pace. So many centres embraced it. And again, that's something I want to share with you today. But before I do that, I obviously can't get away without mentioning the dreaded C word. So like I said, COVID occurred, first cases reported in December, and it took a few months officially for it to reach the UK. And it obviously had a huge impact on our sector, as well as all other sectors pretty much. In fact, I can't think of one other sector that hasn't been impacted. And it's meant that we've all had to adopt new things in our lives, new ways of working, change, etc., etc. And some research was done on how it actually has impacted employers, workforce, and training providers, and that was conducted by SimSpa. So I just want to share some of that insight now, just to show you what we thought could happen based on the feedback that they received in that report. So what that actually looked like for our sector, and whilst this research was conducted with workforce, employers, and training providers, I'm just going to focus on the training providers for today, if that's okay. So as you can see on the screen there, if we look specifically at the data from the training provider respondents, what we saw was that 52%, so just over half of the training providers that responded, were forced to close. And that left the remaining 48% fighting to keep their learners and their businesses afloat. And as we can see, a very small percentage, just 6%, were pretty much unaffected, mainly because we believe from data of this first report and second report from SimSpa last year, and also our own research, that 6% that were unaffected were already delivering remotely, virtually, online, whatever you want to call it, and making a pretty good job of it as well. So for them, there was minimal disruption, but for everybody else, things had to change. And some of the reasons for this, anticipated, again, based on the SimSpa findings, were that majority of closures would probably have had to occur because of face-to-face delivery being delivered in facilities, and where they closed, that obviously couldn't happen. It was actually reported that 50% of learners had just stopped accessing learning for whatever reason. We talk a lot now about the mental health impacts and all the other kind of health and well-being stuff that goes on. It's hit a lot of people hard, and things like motivation, willingness to engage, all the isolation, all those kind of things can impact learners quite considerably. So I have no doubt that has had some impact in causing learners to almost fall off the kind of map, so to speak, when it comes to their program. Hopefully we can get them back as soon as things return to some new normal, whatever that might be. Obviously, there was going to be huge financial implications. 77% of those respondents reported that they were negatively impacted financially. And we're talking about in the tens of thousands of pounds there for what are typically small and medium-sized businesses. So huge amounts of money were lost, obviously. And what that meant was that people were having to look at financial reserves. And one of the most worrying statistics was that it was reported that 65% of those respondents actually only had enough financial reserves to continue for 3 more months. And obviously we are now 12 months plus in. And 38% or thereabouts actually had no financial reserves, which must have been absolutely terrifying and frightening for those people, and leaving them with alternative options sought. And for some, they found it, or it came to them, and others, it just wasn't viable, and hence they closed. So on top of that, many of these businesses had no insurance for loss of earnings. There's over 90%. And then as a result of that, obviously, huge amounts of furlough occurred like most other sectors as well. So 54% of respondents had to report furloughing staff. However, at this time, there was quite a positive outlook in that half of those respondents felt that work would respond or return to normal, hopefully soon. And we're still hoping, we're still there 1 year on. So yeah, a bleak picture for some training providers, which if you open that up, you know, and expand that across the whole education landscape, even just in our sector, that's huge numbers of businesses, livelihoods, learners, people's development progress hugely impacted and affected, which is very, very sad and quite worrying as well. On the other hand, though, we have the training providers that essentially have managed to change what they do or continue what they were already doing in order to stay afloat. So these ones, obviously, many would have a reduction in service, even if they did continue to deliver education, training, etc. There would be some impact on knock-on effect that would cause them to struggle or have difficulties in some areas of their business. And you know, this was highlighted even with big institutions with the summer exams debacle, where we had, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of learners, all not really knowing what was going to happen with their grades, how much learning was going to be counted towards those grades, and kind of feeling a little bit lost, really. And education has taken a really kind of, it's a bit of a rough ride throughout the whole of this pandemic, as have other industries and sectors. But for education, it's kind of been a kind of work it out as we go from the top level. You know, we're talking about government level, and we weren't prepared for this. We just weren't. We never knew it was coming. And we've been delivering education in a certain way for a very long time without really thinking about how things move on. That's not everybody, but I'm just kind of generalizing there. And again, from my own experience, you know, over 20 years working in various parts of education, I've seen it firsthand, kind of resting on our laurels a little bit. So what we did find, though, from this was that 80% of those respondents looked to online provision. So this digital, remote, virtual delivery model was seen as a savior or a way to keep themselves afloat and above water. And what we saw was 15% of those moved everything full online digital delivery and provision for their learners. 58% had some online, so were kind of either had some in place and were building other parts of their provision as they were going. And then 27% had no online provision at all, so would have to start from scratch. But either way, those that have responded, there was a comment in the report that said going online has given them much wider reach. And this is something which I'm sure is going to continue post-lockdown and pandemic. The landscape is changing, and we will have to take note and embrace it. That's my opinion, and that's what I'm here to kind of explore today. So with these that remained open, there was a kind of task for them, really. It was for them to have a viable business model which met all of the stakeholder needs, that is their learners, the awarding organisations, and every other element or body that they engage with in order to deliver their education to their learners. So this was a tough task. You know, I have no doubt it was a huge wake-up call for many training providers. Speaking for FE, I used to work in FE, have many friends who still do. They found it very, very difficult with large class sizes, limited resources and financial investment in technology, and just rolling that out and churning out content and keeping learners enthusiastic, engaged, and like they were getting an equivalent experience to what they would have got in the classroom. It was a very, very tough ask, and so many people rose to the challenge. In fact, some of the best progress and development and work that I've seen has actually been in primary education. Again, I've seen that firsthand with family members that work in primary. So the education sector has, you know, stepped up to the plate and met all of the challenges head on. And there's a saying which I really like, and it's at the bottom of this screen. And that is that life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. And that is exactly what so many training providers and a lot of the sector, have shown that they've done. So that's the kind of data from the SimSpar to impact reports. But we also did our own exploratory work with some of our own training providers who have actually stepped up and changed the way they deliver, amended, developed new content, new ways of delivering. And I just want to share some of that with you in case there's anybody out there that maybe isn't using digital technology, remote delivery, virtual classrooms, etc. at the moment. And it's maybe because they're a bit scared of it, or it's not for them, or it's not what we do, all of those kind of things. But just to show you that it's actually, it might not be as daunting as you think, and there are a lot of pros to it. And again, I'm not advocating that digital is the way forward and the only way forward. There is most definitely a place for face-to-face delivery, but what we're finding is that digital most definitely has a place moving forwards, and its presence has escalated significantly. So just to kind of summarize, you can see for yourself what's on this screen, but if I give you some of the kind of top line information, really, that 57% of those people which we spoke to, active IQ approved training providers, previously had no remote delivery experience pre-lockdown. But coming out of lockdown and moving forward, 100% of those that we spoke to or surveyed on this will continue with this. They've developed new ways of working, lots of benefits, lots of pros, and it's not something that which they're going to park or put away after lockdown. As well, 42% have struggled would have struggled to remain solvent, or would have ceased trading if they didn't embrace digital. So it's been a saving grace for so many businesses that potentially could have gone under, or would have maybe had to make staff redundant or lose teams, furlough more people. It really has mitigated some of the risks to many, many businesses. And this is one thing I found quite positive, is that just over half got by with little to no financial investment. They stepped up, changed their delivery model, and leveraged existing resources which they already had, and used things like freeware to make sure they could provide a similar, if not equivalent level of service to their learners, keeping them learning, keeping them engaged, keeping them working towards assessment as and when that could happen. And then lastly, 86% of respondents found the transition relatively easy in one way, shape or form. So don't be scared of it. Like I said before, make a plan, speak to people who know about this stuff, get them involved if it's something that you're thinking about doing and you don't yet. And one of the biggest things, which I was a little bit shocked at, because I thought the number would be less, is that 100% of the centres reported that their learners had responded positively to this mode of delivery. Now, obviously, that could be biased because we've asked the training providers, we haven't asked the learners, but I was expecting that number to be a little bit less. However, we still got high numbers of staff embracing it, but maybe some reluctance was shown there by some staff members being a bit more reluctant to engage or embrace technology for a multitude of reasons. But nonetheless, this painted quite a positive picture for us as an awarding organisation. And equally, to support that, we've seen our training providers not impacted anywhere near as much as we probably thought they would be or could have been during the pandemic and the lockdown. So all in all, it's been quite a positive experience from our perspective. Obviously, though, with challenges. So one of the key things that was reported within this data collection, which we worked on, was the importance of video content. So I just want to spend a few moments talking about video and its potential. So this is just some information which I've acquired from Think with Google. It's free service, which you can look at yourself. You can basically type in search terms and it will give you loads of stats and information on it. You can take some of this with a pinch of salt. Obviously, YouTube, Google are linked, and the numbers could be swayed in some way, shape or form. But ultimately, I don't think it's that far off. I'm really interested in tech, digital, creators, influencers, all those kind of things. And from the research I've done elsewhere, this does kind of reflect that. So like it says there, 4 in 5 or 80% of people feel that video content helps them learn in a positive way. And really, YouTube does capitalize on this on a daily, weekly, monthly, annually basis. This is why they can pay these creators so much AdSense revenue, because funnily enough, there are so many people that are accessing educational content on a daily basis. It's estimated that 1 million educational videos are uploaded to YouTube on a daily basis, and they have 1 billion views per day globally. And that is huge. And that's just educational content. We're not talking about vlogs about people's lives and things like that. This is purely educational, tagged or metadated video content. It's also believed that 70% of YouTube viewers use the platform to solve work or study problems, highlighting that they actually do use it as a go-to resource, where people would have used textbooks maybe previously as their first point of call. Then they use YouTube, or they're moving more and more towards YouTube now. And there are other platforms which are showing similar pieces of information or insight as well. And really, millennials are driving a lot of this, but also Gen Z, X, etc., baby boomers. Everybody is kind of turning to YouTube to learn something. You know, lockdown haircuts. I've not been to a barber's in more than 12 months. Self haircut, you can comment in the chat box if you want to, but I don't think I've done too bad. Learned from YouTube. Obviously, the first ones weren't so great. It's getting better, but you know, never in a million years before lockdown would I have ever thought about cutting my own hair. I haven't got that much of it. It's fading fast. So me touching it myself was risky, but I learned from YouTube, and there are many, many other things you can learn on YouTube. TikTok is very similar. TikTok is now placing itself or marketing itself as a learning platform. You may have seen the TV adverts recently. I've watched lots of videos and attended lots of conferences where people are learning things in 15 seconds. So you can follow a cake baking recipe from start to finish in 15 seconds and you will get it right. It's been tested numerous times. So the power of social media, and particularly video content, is absolutely huge. And people are flocking to it. And lockdown, pandemic has escalated that and made people go to that as a resource or tool to help them from an educational perspective, to kill time, to feel connected to other people. And that's one of the things which really I wanted to mention as well here, is that a study in 2014 by Variety magazine asked just over 1,500 people on their views of YouTubers particularly. And what the findings of that were that essentially most respondents found or viewed that their favorite YouTubers were more engaging, approachable, and insightful, knowledgeable than experts in the field of which they were related to. So the power of engagement and relatability is not to be underestimated, and video content has a huge or that there can be a huge impact on video content from that perspective. If you think about video, you know, it's now a mainstay of our everyday lives. We use Netflix, Amazon Prime, all the other platforms that exist for downtime. We're watching video content. When we might be using video to engage in health, fitness activities through Peloton, through Les Mills on Demand, and various other platforms like that. We use YouTube for fun, for finding solutions, for problem solving, for educating. We cannot ignore the power of video and the access to platforms which are free for many, many people. So just to kind of wrap up this bit and to kind of highlight another thing around millennials, that almost 3 times as many, or millennials are almost 3 times as likely to go to YouTube or other video platforms to access information and knowledge than they are a textbook when they're studying. And we need to wake up to that, and we need to understand that. And if you are, fantastic. If you're not, you should start thinking about it. And it doesn't have to be on YouTube. You could create your own video content. You could push that out on your own platforms, LMSs, whatever it might be that you have. But video is here to stay, and it is one of the most powerful tools for learning. And it gives you so much, or so many options in terms of how you can build your delivery models and your programs. Because with a piece of video, you can chop it up, you can use it in separate parts, you can just extract the audio and use it as a podcast. There's so many different things you can use it for. It's well worth investing time, effort and energy into. So there are some other stats on there, but one of the other ones I just want to bring reference to is that people feel empowered and more confident when they learn through video as well, is what some of the research is showing. And that's echoed by other webinars and conferences I've been to over the past few weeks, particularly around EdTech and digital learning. So video is hugely important. But how does this kind of fit in with post-lockdown and the future of education? We know that many training providers, unfortunately, have had to close, hopefully temporarily, but some possibly indefinitely. But those that do come back, we look forward to them reopening really soon and getting back to what they do best. But for those that, as I said before, learn to dance in the rain, so to speak, what do they need to consider? What could you do to enhance your provision, change your provision, streamline processes for yourselves, for your learners? There's so many options out there, and I can't cover all of them today. But the one thing we do know is that the landscape is 100% changing. Digital is becoming more and more prevalent, as I said before, and as you're probably fully aware of. I'm sure your own social media usage went up significantly. If you're into social media and use it during a pandemic, it's reported that I think Instagram and TikTok usage, which are the two main platforms now, increased by 72%, at least 72% in the 12 months during lockdown so far. So that's huge. But there are lots of reports out there that do emphasize the power of digital and consumers' need for it. And that's consumers as in participants in various activities like exercise classes, gym sessions, etc., but also participants in education. And this report, which came out recently from the McKinsey Group, who do lots of research on risks, strategies, and all that kind of thing, huge global corporation. They did some research on future trends for 2021 for the sporting goods industry. So it's called the Sporting Goods Industry Report. And what that has shown is, or some of the key findings are shown on this chart I've put on the screen here. So in relation to some of the activities which are covered by our sector, you can see that if you look at the ones which I've circled in orange, gym exercise and Pilates and yoga, they are showing definite growth once lockdown ends, post-pandemic, if there is ever a post-pandemic or whether we're going to live with it. There is going to be an increased demand and participation in those activities. People will go back to the gyms, people will go back to classes. You know, that's inevitable. But equally, a huge number of people have learnt that they can exercise elsewhere, i.e. at home, virtually. And that's reflected in these statistics, whereby we see home exercise, whether that is digital instruction or whether that is self-instruction, which is quite interesting, again, relating back to the YouTube and other platforms where they can seek free video content and follow that at home, albeit it's not a personal service, but that might not be what these people are looking for. Those are going to grow hugely. We're talking, you know, in the realms of 70% increases in participation. Now, you could look at that and really panic as a sector and go, wow, you know, physical bricks and mortar facilities, we're going to see attendances drop. People have learned to exercise at home. I hear that a lot. I've thought about it a fair bit, but we don't have to look at it like that. What we need to look at is, okay, let's embrace this. How can we actually use this to our advantage? What do we need to learn from this emphasis on digital, even down to where things on here like virtual races and e-racing and e-sports, those are all digital based. You know, the growth of those is quite significant, and it's not going to stop. There's too much development in technology happening for us to ignore. So we need to embrace it. And the things that we need to look at really is, number one, like I said before, video is going to be king, whether that is recorded or live stream sessions for these people who want home workouts, for instance. You know, we need to look at that, and we need to educate our workforce to have this string to their bow to be able to go and create this content and push it out there to your customers. There are some amazing, what many call rock star fitness professionals who have just, you know, really grown and escalated their presence in social media, particularly to the point that maybe if they were working at facilities before, maybe they don't need to. They've created such a brand for themselves in the past 12 months that it's quite lucrative for them to continue to do that on their own. I've seen quite a few do that through just following them on social media over the past 12 months. So there is that, but equally we can still do that from within the four walls of our physical facilities. And I know a lot of operators are looking to digital and providing on-demand services as a core part of their business offer now. But what we need to also consider is that this content is free. So what can we do to make sure that we can compete with that? And one of the things to look at is, you know, what's the provenance or the background of these influencers, social media presenters against what you have to offer as a business in terms of credibility, etc. I'm not saying they're not credible, but that's going to be one of the biggest shifts or areas of focus that you're going to need to look at in terms of how you ensure that you are promoting your brand and that it's credible and more credible or more worthy than someone watching a free YouTube video, for instance. But in terms of education, like I said, we need to educate our learners, our workforce, that digital is here to stay and that they need to embrace it, and their customers are going to want more of it as well. So that's kind of some of the key things we need to focus on, but also looking at taking lessons from some of the most popular YouTubers out there. I'm really interested in photography and videography. If you want to see someone who's really inspirational, you don't have to like videography or photography, but a guy called Peter McKinnon, whose YouTube account has grown massively in the past few years. I think he was the fastest YouTuber to 1 million subscribers, but his early stuff is amazing. His newer stuff is getting more and more corporate, but that's off the back of him just making so much money from YouTube. Other people like Casey Neistat is another one. My son likes watching his vlogs. I find them quite interesting just to watch it for free time. An amazing storyteller. And again, that's something which we need to focus on in video content that's produced. It's not just about giving a lecture. It's about engaging people and captivating them in stories and making sure it's relatable to their own personal lives, experiences, etc. So that they can get the most out of it and develop meaningful long-term memory and retention of information that they can use in their workplace. So I just want to bring this up and mention this, but it doesn't stop there really. And I keep talking about social media, and I just want to flag this bit while we're here as well, that you may be aware of some of these apps, platforms. So we've got YouTube, Masterclass, Outlier, Khan Academy, green one in the middle, left, Coursera, Skillshare, Udemy, Short Academy, and LinkedIn Learning. So that's those 9 on the left-hand side. They are learning platforms which have grown, have seen huge growth during the pandemic. People wanting to access, there was a thirst for knowledge and people to learn new skills, gain new information, or just learn for fun in something which they're interested in as a hobby. But equally, we cannot rule out how important social media has been in education as well. Instagram with its reels, previously video or live, lots of education occurs there, mainly to sell products, if I'm honest, but nonetheless, it is education and it works. TikTok, like I said, is starting to peg itself as a learning platform. Facebook can be used. So all those 3 things can roll out video content. In the bottom right and the one above it, so the 2 smiley kind of face icons, we've got Discord and we've got Reddit. Not accessed so much, but nonetheless, they're chat forums. Lots of people share information, insights, intelligence, thoughts, views, opinions, etc. in there, and they are well subscribed. But in the top right, if you've not come across this one before, this is called Clubhouse. If you're not familiar with Clubhouse, this launched back in April 2020, partly in response to the pandemic and a way of helping people remove that feeling of isolation. It is, however, a invite-only platform. So you can only get on it if you're invited by someone that has an account. I've got an account. I joined it a few months ago, and basically it is a platform where some of the the world's leading think tanks, authorities, experts, celebrities, you name it, all different walks of life are active and giving free discussions, webinars, seminars, etc., that they will engage with the community that follow them personally. So where you might previously have had to buy a ticket to go to an event to see these people, you can now access them pretty much free of charge, so long as you can get into the room where they're holding these conversations. And what I've noticed is that health, fitness, well-being specifically are becoming hugely subscribed on this platform. And there are some very influential presenters and even academics that are mixing in these chat rooms. So if you can get on it, it's well worth having a look and just seeing what it has to offer. They don't offer video, but it is, it feels more personable because you can actually engage with the person and ask questions. People like Elon Musk have been in there recently talking in chat rooms. So that goes to show you the reach of it. But because it's invite only, it's had over 10 million downloads of the app in the past few months alone. It only has just over 6 million active users at the moment because it is invite only, and they're reluctant to expand that and open that up just to everybody at this stage. And it's only been around for 12 months and it's already estimated to be worth more than $1 billion. That just goes to show that the kind of adoption of it and the growth of it. And these things are all new fledgling companies, but they are having quite an impact in the L&D world. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that. But there's one in particular I just want to show a little bit more on, and they do something that's quite different and I think is really important moving forwards. And this is likened to a phrase where Hollywood meets Harvard. And the company I want to talk about is Outlier. So Outlier is a learning platform which is being developed by the co-founder of Masterclass, I believe, which is another hugely popular learning platform. And what this site is doing is producing high production value, highly engaging content with reputable and credible presenters and educators in a fairly cost-effective package with credible outcomes, i.e. it's linked to various universities so that people will earn college credits, etc. They've only got a small number of offerings at the moment, but like Masterclass, it will grow rapidly, I'm sure. And basically, it's quite impressive what they're doing. So I just want to show you a 2-minute video, just under 2 minutes, of Outlier, one of the programs that they're offering, and then I'll just chat about that afterwards. So if you could just watch this, that would be great. It's on calculus, nothing to do with fitness or physical activity sector.
If you have a little bit of anxiety around the idea of taking calculus, I would encourage you to give it a chance.
We don't all learn in the same way.
So we are going to be teaching the same content
in different ways. I'd say my teaching style is somewhat laid back. I'm the only instructor that's using a blackboard.
And I prefer a fountain pen and paper. I want to make calculus a bit more human.
I'll be teaching with a tablet. We're going to look at the infinitely large, the infinitely small.
There's going to be a lot of storytelling alongside the calculus.
I hate to do this to my hometown team, but we're going to look at the Buffalo Bills fan base as our example for exponential decay.
So here we go. Low D high minus high D low over low low. What? Let's piece it together.
There are these mathematical functions in the things that make us happy. This is an example of taking something in the real world and giving you more information through the equations. Basically, if you're in your 20s, enjoy it while it lasts. There is no reason why everyone shouldn't have access to the very best education.
I hope this course can be a gateway to help students from different backgrounds to start their college career.
Calculus is this place where once you've mastered the rules, you can let your curiosity run completely riot.
Welcome to Calculus 1. Let's get started.
Let's get started.
Let's get started.
So that is Outlier. It's a fairly new company on the scene. I don't know about you, I'm not interested in calculus, but I'm very intrigued as to what that class looks like, and I'd even consider taking it. I just want to cover some of the things which they are really tapping into. And yes, you may think, well, what's that got to do with us, physical activity sector in the UK? The bottom line is these people are coming for you if you don't do something to embrace the learners' needs, stakeholder needs, sector needs, and education access, or how to access education. They're starting with calculus, maths, physics, psychology, those kind of subjects. But if it goes well, you know, where does it stop? Where do they draw the line? And it could be that they move into areas of education that we all deliver, typically face-to-face, maybe digitally in the future. So some of the things that they tap into, which I just want to identify, is they talk about some of these in the video, is people's anxieties. You know, learning, not everybody's an extrovert. Some people have real anxieties about accessing education. This is quite a soft way to access it, particularly if you don't want to join a face-to-face workshop, bricks and mortar, or you have a negative experience maybe of education previously. It also taps into learning preferences in that they deliver in multiple ways. So like I said, we've got someone delivering old school on a blackboard on video, someone writing with a fountain pen, someone using tech on a tablet, lots of different ways that they're conveying different pieces of information. They're also using multiple tutors for the same subject. So it swaps it up, it changes it. There's an element of anticipation or novelty there. You're not always going to get the same person delivering the content. They want you to tap into your curiosity. So they'll use storytelling and humor and things like that to help spark your curiosity to learn more on the subject. And lastly, there is, as you can see, hopefully from that video, a huge emphasis on production quality. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go and do all of this in order for you to compete. That's not what I'm saying at all. You know, they're a big company who've spent lots and lots of money. But it's lessons that we can learn from organizations and businesses like this that we can use and make small changes to what we do as educators and training providers. So some of the things which they tap into are based around the ages learning model. You may have seen this before, you may not have done. So if you have, bear with me. If you haven't, hopefully this gives you some new intelligence or insights into constructing a learning program. But essentially, this model implies that our brain learns best when you are actively engaging the hippocampus, which is the area associated with moving short-term memory to long-term memory, and also by paying attention to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So this is the area that's involved in working memory. And it uses these kind of 4 stages really to make sure that we maximize that opportunity to get those 2 things in sync and to give them a break when is needed. So like it says there, any content or learning that you build, and this applies to face-to-face delivery as well as remote virtual digital delivery as well. It's not unique to either of those or exclusive to either of those, but it's about having content that grabs your learner's attention. It's about generating new neural connections that enhance learning, memory, recall. It's also about tapping into people's emotions and feelings. So how can we enhance the learning experience by making sure that we're tapping into the emotional side of learners? And then lastly, about spacing. So making sure that we have long enough breaks between learning material and that we tap into that recall process for any material that we're trying to get across. So like it says here, I'm not going to go through all of this, and I can share the slides if anybody wants them afterwards. But essentially with the attention side, we need to make sure that learners are given the opportunity to focus on a single point of information. And that shouldn't be really for more than 20 minutes at a time without a break. And the reason for this is I used to be an observer, and observe lessons in a FE environment. And often learners are multitasking or doing lots of different things, and that's very, very hard for learners to do. This switching of focus all the time. And what that actually does is that taxes the prefrontal cortex. It actually fatigues it much more quickly, and then concentration can become challenging. So we should really be looking at 20-minute bursts of activity is the recommended amount of time before we give the learner some sort of break. That could be a physical break, i.e. get up, go to the toilet, make yourself a cup of tea, whatever it is. Or it could be at that point a switch of tasks just to move their focus from what they're working on to something else, and then to bring it back after that activity. So it's just something to bear in mind there, really. The creating neural networks piece really is predominantly around making that learning personal. How can you get a learner to relate the content that they are covering, learning, exploring to them? What relevance does it have to them or people they know? How can they use it in the future? How can they apply it? And one of the best ways to do this is through social interactions, and particularly peer teaching. So getting learners to teach their peers, colleagues, something that they've learned. And that could be in a number of different ways, which you can kind of figure out for yourselves. But like I said, moving on to the emotional side of it, that's really about, like I said, making sure that we're giving learners the best opportunity to move information from working memory to this long-term memory, so that they can store it and recall it when is needed. And by doing that, we accelerate the learning process. And we can't underestimate how important generating a positive environment or learning environment is for this to happen. It's one of the essential conditions that needs to be met. We've all been there before. You might have had a real rush in the morning to get somewhere, lots of problems, chaos, carnage, etc. You turn up, you're frustrated, and you just keep going over how frustrated you are. Doesn't put you in the best frame of mind for learning. Therefore, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing with learners is that it's positive, that there's an element of kind of anticipation in a positive way, novelty, like I said before, to achieve that. And yeah, making sure that they have the best environment to utilize the resources that they have at their disposal. In a virtual environment, one of the easiest things to do is to make sure that you have your camera on. I've seen lots of sessions delivered and been to lots where the camera is off. And to take it a step further, when I deliver educational content, I'll use a different platform, and it actually puts my not so beautiful face in the presentation, or I can move around the presentation. There is software you can use to do that. Some of it's paid for, some of it is free. It just changes up a standard Keynote or PowerPoint presentation. But there's nothing to say that you also have to use Keynote or PowerPoint or equivalents. You know, there's nothing wrong with face to camera, having a discussion with learners and just talking through content, or engaging with them in some way via activities that you've planned. So think about how you use your video content, and think about the production value as well, because if it looks sloppy or pixelated, then the likelihood is that they're not going to engage with it and they'll switch off. So do consider that. And then the last point around spacing, all I'd say that is, if you've not come across it before, take a look at the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So this was some research which was done in the 1800s, and it still holds true today, in that in order to be able to retrieve and retain information, or retain it and retrieve it when necessary, we need to focus on spaced repetition to move that knowledge from working memory to long-term memory. The more we do it, the more likely it is to shift there. So the theory behind it is that you should revisit content at least 3 times over a spaced time frame. And there is masses of research now on retention strategies, revision strategies, whatever you want to call them, interleaving approaches as well. So do have a look at those. But one of the best models for this is either hybrid with the adoption of a flipped classroom, in my opinion. And again, lots of textbooks would suggest the same as well. Equally, consider using things like breakout rooms in your webinars, virtual delivery sessions, remote sessions, whatever you want to call them, and build tasks. So wherever possible, avoid lecturing, and wherever possible, use as many tasks to get the learning material across, so learners almost discover for themselves. It's way more likely to stick, and they're much more likely to be engaged and take ownership. And don't underestimate the power of sleep. Very, very important. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's fundamental and underpins a lot of educational processes. So I just wanted to touch on that. It's well worth looking at this model if you've not seen it before. It's got a lot to offer, in my opinion. There are others, but this is one of the ones which I quite like. So to move this on just a little bit, and we're nearly there, I'm conscious of time, we've got 2 minutes to go. This is just something which I would say you should maybe consider looking at as a start point for any digital program, virtual program, online program, or addition of these things to your own delivery of content, learning, education, however you want to term it, really. So there are 5 steps to what I see as being a robust model. And these are, if you are going to switch to a digital delivery model, you always need to make sure that you have, it sounds obvious, but you have some form of welcome presence, that when a learner signs up, they get access immediately to some content that makes them feel like they're already being onboarded or inducted almost into the program. So that could be a video message, you know, a person from your organization face to camera, welcoming, inviting, and giving them some of the key information that they're going to need and making them feel at ease. Because remember, education can be daunting for a lot of people. Follow that up with some form of induction webinar whereby you go through, you know, all the key things around the program and course that they may need to know, but may need to put their minds at ease and make sure that they are on the right program for them. I'm sure you do a lot of these things anyway, particularly in face-to-face delivery, but it can be, it's no different really in a virtual or online or remote environment. So there are a range of activities that you can do there, but one of the biggest things, which I'll mention in just a minute on the next slide, is digital literacy. So I won't talk too much about that yet because it's on the next slide, but it definitely needs consideration. You may be doing that already, but if you're not, it's something you should be doing. So once you've done your welcome kind of piece of the program, so to speak, it's then time to think about the next 2 phases and think of them in tandem really, or accompanying one another. So we have what's called immersive workshops, and I would highly advocate using a flipped classroom model for this. If you don't know what flipped learning is, it kind of does what it says on the tin. Traditional model of delivery is lecture or demonstration, etc., by the tutor, often referred to as the sage on the stage, and then the learners go away and do homework, might do some activities in the lesson as well, but then they'll come back and they'll repeat that cycle. What flipped classroom does is the opposite. Any lecture or content that is consistent or standardized across the program is typically recorded, or might be in a book, or could be a podcast. It could be lots of different media formats, but that's shared with all the learners. They're expected to do that at home in preparation for the follow-up activities that engage them in class time, whether that is in a face-to-face venue, bricks and mortar, or whether that is in a virtual environment, online, so to speak. So flipped learning is highly effective and has been shown to develop higher order thinking skills within learners as well. So there's lots of things you can do there, but video content, like I said before, is a key part of this, whether that is live or pre-recorded. It's probably going to be a mixture of both. And do consider what tech you use for that. Cheap cameras don't always give you good quality video. Then again, you can get really good quality cameras now at a fairly affordable price point. And there's lots of those on the market. You only have to Google YouTube cameras and you'll get a whole load of them come up. And you can get them for as little as £100, some of them as well. So you will need to probably invest in technology if you don't have that before. Just as well though, things like iPhones and Samsung phones and all the others, Android phones, these all have fantastic cameras on them these days. You can even teach from a phone. I've seen it done and to great effect. So don't neglect what you have in your pocket most of the time. It can be really impactful. So there's that, but don't forget that it's not just about what they learn in those videos and in the immersive workshops. You need to get them to be relating that to the workplace, real life situations, and case studies. But another thing to consider is the importance of social collaboration with learning. This is being adopted by all of the major LMS platforms now, all of those major learning applications, which I showed you on a previous slide. The power of social learning is being researched hugely, and there are lots of positive findings showing that people who learn together and collaborate on their learning tend to be far more successful and achieve more. So don't avoid that. And then within all of this, it's about embedding frequent learning checks for learners to ensure that they are confident that they're making progress and that you're confident that they're making progress. And then also, wherever you can, holistically implanting or embedding their summative assessments around that as well. I am very aware that as a result of closures of facilities and things like that, assessment has been a real problem for a lot of training providers, and this has created a bottleneck with some qualifications. Unfortunately, that's one of those things which the nature of the requirements of assessment, we can't change. There are assessment adaptations which we have in place, but you cannot replace the whole assessment at this stage, unfortunately. That said, there are many platforms that are working on the next best things in assessment, from VR, AR, AI, you name it. It's out there and it's coming soon. So keep your eye on technology and development with EdTech. It's estimated to be valued at $380 billion by 2025, the EdTech industry. So again, it's not small, you know, we're talking about huge amounts of money. So yeah, embrace. And then lastly, certification. It's not just about giving them a certificate at the end of it. Hopefully that program's been so engaging, immersive, and has stuck and has emotionally engaged them that they want to know what's next. You should be thinking about your learners, obviously, not just for one program, but for a whole lifelong study, essentially. So think about how you can engage them. And one of the ways to tackle this is through the comments at the bottom. So about a program feeling like it's personalized towards that learner. That can be, even in a group scenario, through one-to-one tutorial support, whether that's online, telephone, whatever it might be. Even down to, there's lots of research now and lots of delivery platforms are working on eye-to-eye contact. So whilst I'm talking to you now, I'm not necessarily making eye-to-eye contact with any of you. Some of the systems now are allowing multiple cameras on the tutor's screen so that when they look at another learner's picture on their screen, if they've all got their cameras on, it feels to the learner like they are having a kind of personal connection with that tutor. So there's company, I think one's called Barker, which is working on that at the moment. I was in a demo of it a few weeks ago. Absolutely phenomenal and well worth looking at, but no doubt costly. Again, engaging, motivating, and energizing goes without saying. But then last two bits about being feedback rich and data rich. The feedback rich really is about you giving as much feedback to your learners as you possibly can via whatever platforms, methods, modes you see fit, but about you collecting as much data at various important touch points that you feel along the way. So collect data wherever you can that is relevant to you enhancing and developing your program is what I would say there. Last couple of slides then, we're nearly there. So just want to talk about digital literacy. I'll be very quick on this. This got overlooked massively, in my opinion, particularly at the start of the pandemic, as everybody switched to moving to online, particularly in schools. And I experienced this with my son. He was in the GCSE year group, down to little things like log on from home. But nobody spoke to anyone about using a wired internet connection versus a Wi-Fi connection, and hence lots of people having internet connectivity issues because of Wi-Fi. It was overloaded with so many people trying to get online. One of the easiest ways to mitigate that at the time was probably to insert a wire from your laptop to your modem, and it would have solved up those problems. But at no point were people really talking about it. So there's lots of little things that can be tweaked, but people may not be aware of, and this falls under digital literacy. So just want to compare these things quickly, really. There's the can and can't. So this is whether people actually have the skills to work in this remote digital virtual way. If they don't, then this probably isn't the way forward for them, and you need to be open and honest with them about that. There's the have and haven't, and this is around people actually having the technological resources, the technology to join a remote digital online virtual program. If they don't, again, it's not the program for them. And if they do go and acquire those resources, it's do they then have the skills to use that resource? So that needs consideration. Then there's the wills and the won'ts. Some people just will not embrace this way of working, and that's absolutely fine. No matter what incentives you put in there, they just won't give it a chance. I've come across a lot of those people in my time in the world of education, and it's difficult to challenge that. And again, it might not be the type of format or delivery program for them. And then there's the should and shouldn't to consider. And that's where it comes down to your planning. Does the task, activity, content have a place online, virtually, digitally, remotely? If it doesn't, then don't shoehorn it in. It might have to wait until you can either get to a physical venue or find another means of sharing or delivering that content. So digital literacy, often overlooked, but is hugely, hugely important. And then just moving on as well to another topical thing, which I hear a lot about, is the soft skills debate. And we can't teach soft skills, I often hear, online, remotely. It's impossible. It has to be done in a classroom, face-to-face. I disagree, because on that list there, that's the top 10 soft skills that has been identified by Indeed for last year, 2020. There are others which have been added for 2021, including resilience, mental well-being, and a few others. But these 10, in my opinion, can be taught / developed, because there is the debate of whether you can teach soft skills fully, or are they developed in the workplace or in an activity, learnt by doing and engaging and interacting with others. But most definitely, if you look at all the comments in white on either side of this, and I'm not going to go through them all, again, I'll send the slides and you can look at them. Most of those things, there is an activity that can be completed online, or a range of activities that can be completed online or virtually in real time, or via pre-recorded and engaging content that will challenge all of those soft skills in varying degrees or amounts, granted, but nonetheless they can be challenged and they can be developed. So don't rule out that you can't develop soft skills in a virtual environment. You 100% can. I've experienced myself, I've done it myself, I've developed my own soft skills myself in a virtual environment, and 100% doable. So just to wrap up my kind of parting thoughts with you, really, I just want to share this example with you. You are probably all aware of AT&T as an organization, business in the US, telecommunications and media. They were a huge company, and if you worked for them 30 years ago, you probably got some really decent training in your first weeks, months that you worked there, and you had a job for life, and that training set you up for the whole of your career. And that's essentially how that business operated until the tech kind of world really accelerated and grew, and we all started getting smart devices and what have you in our hands. And what AT&T found was that their share price was dropping, the business wasn't performing as well. And in 2008, they did a large piece of research about what was happening with the business, because it was declining considerably. They got over 250,000 employees globally. And what this research actually showed was that most of those employees, over 100,000 of them, actually had received no training, no updates, were not familiar with developments in their sector or industry. And it meant that they were basically not going to have the skills to take the business forward in the future. And there were all of these smaller new startup tech companies that were snapping at their heels and could develop and change and adapt very, very rapidly, much faster than someone like AT&T could have done. So what they did was they analyzed all their skills in the business, and they rolled out a huge $1 billion education program to upskill all of their staff globally to make sure they could meet the demands of an ever-changing sector. And that's kind of what I want to say to you is, yes, we have an education sector which is thriving but can thrive even more if we embrace change, we embrace technology. Don't do away with our existing past, previous teaching and learning methods, approaches, venues, etc. Those are very, very important. But what I would say is, if you haven't embraced technology in some way, shape or form as yet, don't get caught off guard snoozing, because there are companies like Outlier out there who are going to be at your tail and developing content in God knows what sector moving forwards. So embrace it, get involved in it. Your learners, they want technology. Give them what they want, really. It's worth speaking to your learners and getting their views as well. So last part for me is just do it. No matter how big, how small, small changes, and get feedback on that, gain data on it to see what's working, what's not. And as you get that data, you can develop your service and your offer and make sure that it meets your learners' needs, stakeholder needs, your staff needs, and your business needs. Streamline things, develop things, and everybody will be a winner. So hopefully you found that useful, some of that today. All that's left for me to say is thank you for your time and taking the time out to listen and invest in yourself in developing. I know everybody's time is precious as we're moving closer and closer to things opening. I am going to be looking at setting up a digital support / networking group in the coming weeks. So if you're somebody or your organization is interested in being part of that, where we can share best practice, discuss things to do with remote, digital, edtech, all those kind of things that might help you, your colleagues, your learners, your business grow, develop, enhance, then please do reach out, get in touch with me, and I will send further details about that when the time comes. But other than that, that's it from me in terms of delivery. So I'll hand back to Chris. I'm not sure if there's any questions. I'm sorry I've gone over. But,
no, amazing. Thank you very much. I think the passion that you have for this topic is pretty obvious, considering you've just talked non-stop on it for well over an hour. So yeah, grab a drink of water, have a rest. I think it's been fantastic. The audience stayed on for well past the hour. So I think everybody's really enjoyed that session. I know that I've made some great notes, and there's a number of areas now that I've got Google tabs open in the background to go and research more into and find out more about. So, and I'll be in touch definitely about the group that you just mentioned. We have got some questions, but I think what we'll do, we'll take those offline and make sure that you've got those, and then we'll respond to those directly off the back of the session. We are obviously going to share the session via ActiveIQ's Skills Hub as well. And then I know that there has been some requests as to whether the slides could be shared off the back of this.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I'll send them.
Brilliant. We'll get those sent out very soon to everybody who's attended through email. And then you've got James's contact details should anybody want to pick up the conversation, because I get the feeling James could probably talk about this for about another 3 hours at least. So yeah, it's been brilliant, James. Really enjoyed it. And I think on behalf of everybody who's attended all 4 L&D Network events over the past few months, just want to put on record thanks to yourself and ActiveIQ as headline sponsors. I think we've had some brilliant audiences over the last few months, and it's going to be an interesting period as we reopen the sector and continue to look to see how we support the development of our workforce. So yeah, thank you very much, James. I think we'll wrap things up there, and thank you again to everybody who's attended today.
Excellent. Thank you all for your time, and yeah, get in touch if you need anything.
Thank you, James.
Excellent. Take care. Bye.
Bye.